We have one more guest with us here for Women's History Month. This one very special. We have Dr. Katia Passerini. Katia, I'll let you introduce yourself. Who are you to the Spokane community?
I am the 27th president of Gonzaga University.
Amazing. And not just the 27th president, but the first woman, right?
The first woman, yeah, not the first lay. We had a lay president
Okay.
prior to myself, Dr. Thane McCullough, but I'm the first woman.
That's amazing. And so, stepping into a role of the significance for the university, how has it been? How have you felt?
It's been amazing.
Okay.
A roller coaster of events and things that you have to learn all of a sudden. I've been in higher ed for a long time, but it's always coming to a new institution. You need to learn not only what you see on the website, but how the culture is and how people interact with each other. So that's been a steep learning curve. And then for me, another learning curve has been the Pacific Northwest, which is amazingly beautiful, beyond what I could have imagined.
It is a special place.
It is a special place, yeah.
I mean, coming from sorry, for context, you mentioned you were in Brooklyn before this for a couple of decades,
Yes,
right?
so I arrived to the U.S. in 1993. I completed my graduate studies on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., so I was there for about 8 years. Then I went back to Italy, my native country, for a few years working in industry before coming back then permanently, I would say. In 2003, I settled in Brooklyn, New York City, and I worked between New York and New Jersey in different higher ed institutions.
I've been really excited to talk with you because of, I guess, your diverse background, not just in the U.S., but across the world here. Women's History Month is big, and
Yes.
it's a celebration of everything we in prior generations have built for women. Is that something that you see across cultures, across the world, like coming from Italy? Is this something that they struggle with there as well, or is that an us
Oh,
thing?
no, absolutely. And in fact, we have this tradition of, it's not necessarily just the entire month, but there is one day of the month, which is March 8th, and that's Women's Day. And the reason why it's very important in Italy as a tradition, but all over the world. I mean, we recognize that day as International Women's Day. But in Italy, that day, you will receive flowers, that little yellow flower called mimosa, like the drink, but it's not
Oh,
a drink.
yep,
It's a
okay.
beautiful flower. And it's a gesture of recognition that usually anyone from your kids to other, colleagues or friends do for women to celebrate, their day. So it's definitely an international phenomenon and one that I am very proud that we continue to celebrate.
Yeah. And it's obviously a celebration of the progress we've made.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we're still on the right track, making upward progress?
I think we are. We still have a lot of more progress to do, but if you consider, the times when women didn't have the right to vote, they didn't have the right to establish a business. We have made a tremendous progress. I mean, and look at today. Even if I look at just in higher ed, leadership in higher ed has been significantly changing over the years, thanks to the fact that women like to be student-oriented and teach. So those helping profession. So you always find women in those service-oriented areas, and eventually, with time, you have an opportunity to grow into a leadership role. It doesn't happen right away, but I see that change. And what's interesting is you see that a lot, especially in the U.S., in Catholic higher ed, because a lot of Catholic institutions here in the U.S. were founded by nuns who were running schools and were running hospitals. And so you've seen but if you look at the U.S., 40% of presidents of Catholic higher ed institutions were women. So that is changing a little bit because some of those smaller schools are closing, but many are continuing in the path of now adding women as we transition out from clergy to lay leadership. And the Jesuits, which Gonzaga, as you know, is one of the 27 Jesuit universities in the U.S., are actually leading over a third of the presidents now are women leaders, and the last two appointments as well has been two more women. So I'm excited about that, and it shows a lot on the direction where we're going. There is still a lot of work to do. If I take those numbers outside of the U.S. and I put at an international level, there was a study that was done recently by Universidade Católica of Portugal that showed that if you look at Catholic higher ed internationally, it's only 8%
Oh, wow.
Of women leading institutions. And that's more due to the fact that some of those institutions are diocesan, and therefore there is still a clergy because of the continuity of the Catholic tradition. But we can make progress there as well.
And when you expand it out of higher ed, even, I recently read something explaining the percentage of world leadership that women is involved in, and it's still really low. What are some things that you could say we can do as a local community and then on a broader scale to continue pushing the needle?
So I think what we need to continue to do is create the pipeline. Because you don't get to a leadership position overnight, and you're not appointed to it. So you need to start creating those skills and opportunities and pathway earlier. So my field of specialization and discipline is MIS, Management Information Systems, and especially in technology areas and STEM areas, you see still less women than you see in other professions. For example, you go to nursing and you see a lot of women and young girls wanting to be in that profession. And that's maybe because we have artificially created this idea that technology is not fun. And if you look at the institutions that have made a lot of progress is the one who have made it fun, who have made it, if you think about, let's just look at this for a second. Half of the world customers population is going to be women. We're 50-50. In fact, even a little bit more higher women in terms of population than men. So you need to think about technology that interfaces with the needs and taste of a population that where half of your customers need to be attracted to the tool and the technology in a way that attracts, young generation or later generations. There are a lot of women right now. If you think about Facebook, it used to be the hot thing for young people. Now, anybody who's on Facebook is generally above 50, right? But that becomes how you keep in touch with your community in a user-friendly way. And so you need to be able to target and create products that capture that part of the population. And it makes sense to have women lead that development.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
What was your path into where you are now?
Well, my path was completely accidental. I loved to write, and so I wanted to be a journalist first, like you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I actually took a class in gender studies related to journalism when I was in grad school. And one of the big things about journalism was that there is a push of more women being in this field as well. And so recently, within the last decade, we've tipped the scales to more women versus men in journalism, which is interesting. So
that's awesome.
Becoming
Yes.
another one of those fields that is kind of women driven.
Yeah.
But sorry, tangent.
No,
Continue.
this is great, and we need more of that.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was my initial interest, and then I started to do journalism. I said political science makes a lot of sense. I was interested in what was happening in the world, and then in poli science you take a lot of economics classes, and I found myself fascinated by the notion of supply and demand, and how what you do at the micro level it actually affects the entire population, because it's a microeconomics is affected by a consolidation of supply and demand forces that then create changes to interest rates and lending rates and etc. So I found that really fascinating.
It's like an ecosystem.
It's
all in
an
itself.
ecosystem. It was logically structured. I mean, you understand and study irrational behavior. I mean, you don't behave rationally all the time if you look at the stock market prices and fluctuation. But it was you could map behaviors and expectations and incentives and how people respond to incentives.
Wow.
So I found that fascinating. So I decided to then move into more economics type of studies. And when I came in the U.S., I started an MBA, international business. So we we studied international financial swaps, economics and finance interconnected. But when I came in the U.S., it was the mid '90s, and it was not the first, but it was a big dot-com boom. The internet, companies moving, there was this web browser called Mosaic, so everybody was excited about the graphical user interface. And there were companies popping up every single day and launching new technologies or applications that would run on this great infrastructure that was the internet. So you couldn't have any conversation without talking about that. A little bit like today's AI, right? You
yes,
get
okay.
this other big bubble of now technology and AI will solve everything. Back then is now the internet will connect everybody worldwide. So I got fascinated by technology and decided to start a doctoral program in information systems, and that's where the pathway to learning about IT, being in an academic environment, and then deciding to become a professor at some point to start it. Yeah.
Well, both academia and IT are kind of men-driven fields, right? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced trying to come up in that world successfully as a woman?
Yeah, so I think one challenge as I was studying was the lack of women role models in that field. So I had this one professor, the only woman in the Department of Information Systems, and she was amazing. Math undergraduate, went into technology, worked for computer companies, and so she took the few young girls in the class under her wing and showed us what was possible. So I think that was, the challenge is how many of those. My professors were all fantastic. I want to start with that.
Yeah,
they were all
of course.
great. But yet there was this one professor that saw us as students who needed mentoring to be able to excel. And to date, she's still on my cell phone, and I can call her at any time. Other challenges, I think, and I saw that more, not so much in academia, because if you go out from your discipline field, there are other specializations where you find a lot of other women. So you have a lot of points of reference. But when I was working in IT, I worked for about 3 years in management consulting, specifically in IT projects in large corporations. That became more difficult. Lots of engineers, lots of specialists who didn't really look like me or had a different background. What I loved, though, is I was the one who came with a set of skill that was additive to the team. So, for example, I could do project management. I was working, because I had studied in the U.S. and went back to do consulting in northern Italy. I was working as the interface with American companies, so General Motors or other British telecom when I was in the telecom area. So I was able to bring in aspects of how you work internationally that my colleagues didn't have. And so I always found that while it was difficult to be in an environment where you're one of the few women, as long as you have something to offer, as long as you work hard and you add value to every situation, you have an opportunity for recognition. And there is a funny story that when I was leaving one of the companies I worked on to come back in the U.S., we got a great get-together dinner, and they gave me a perfume, which is CK, Calvin Klein. I'm not branding Calvin Klein, I'm just saying. But the reason why they gave me CK, one, I liked it. Second was it's Capo Katia, C for Capo, like the boss, and K for my initial Katia. Because here is this group that at the end I was telling everybody what to do in that context, and I found that fascinating.
That's not Calvin Klein, then. That's all you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it is just a funny spot, because even you saying if you bring something special to the table, it will help you succeed. That's just a different world to live in compared to a man who maybe doesn't need that something special to succeed in that world, right? And so, like, socially, I mean, I know any woman who's come up in the world, a lot of times you're underestimated in situations. And so what would you say to a young girl who's out there and feeling that, in social settings where you're just kind of like, I feel like I was overlooked there. What would you say to someone?
What I would say is understand who is around the table, go back, work harder, and come back the next day and surprise them with something absolutely, out of the blue, and so that they'll start paying attention, and they will. Emotionally, for someone who has to go through this, and I understand we've all had, I've had a lot of years of experience. You need to grow into that space, and that's where you need to go back to who's your network of support, who can you have this conversation with that you can't in the room where you are performing, but you can certainly in a safer space, and create that network of support immediately, because that's what carries you through the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, we're all built on support systems. Right? I think Italy does a really good job of the support system thing.
So I'm glad you bring that up, because when you said how much more and what do we need to go moving forward, I think the difference that I see between European countries in general and the US is there is a very solid structure of support for gender equity, and this is not just Italy, it's a EU mandate. And to the point that there is something that in some countries might be controversial, but the EU has adopted it as a modus operandi, which is you have to have quotas. So, for example, if you are in a parliamentary position in the European Union, there are quotas for how many women and how many men are elected to positions. And sometimes you're like, really, do we need that? But the reality is, well, if you think about proportionality of representations, then yes, we might need that if it's not happening already.
Right.
So if a lot of the legal systems have evolved because of all the great work that women before us did to recognize opportunities for equality of access, and both as a representative but also as a family member. So a woman, of course, has a role as a professional, but also a role as a daughter, as a mother. And so there are structures and systems that are built to support that role.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it de facto equal. You still have some perceptions of differences, but yet you have a support structure that enables you to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you have become one of those people here in our community, someone who's an inspiration and like the start of a big support system for the students at Gonzaga. How does that feel?
I hope so. One, it's humbling. Second is I don't know that that's enough, because when you become a role model and build a support system, and the first time you fail an entire community. You don't fail only yourself. And so I think you have that heaviness of the expectations that you need to do well. You must do this for everyone. And I think it's impossible in the world we are today not to run into issues, and sometimes you'll make mistakes, and then you have to move on. I think it's important to be able to express that we don't have to have a higher expectation because a professional in that position now is a woman. We actually have to understand that any professional, sooner or later, will have to encounter difficult challenges, and sometimes will soar against them. So I think I feel the added responsibility of this indirect mentoring, but I hope that with that comes that grace that we will expect, in the inevitable realities
an
that we will have
equitable
to
understanding
face.
of the situation that you're in, leading a very big and powerful institution.
Yeah,
So.
I'll, as a journalist, I think that you will appreciate, if I look at what happened a couple of years ago, it was in 2023, some very prestigious Ivy League institutions had women leaders who were called to testify in front of Congress on anti-Semitism in their campuses. And unfortunately, it was a very difficult time, and I think what prevailed in the aftermath of those events is there was a very legalistic response to a problem which was a very human problem. We condemn war in any of its form. However, when you're representing an institution and you're in front of cameras in Congress, you always are with the legal response where maybe we could have had a more human approach to understanding pain and how to move forward. We had a similar scenario a few months later where in front of Congress we had a number of presidents who, learning from the first congressional talks, have gone to the room with their lawyers and they were prepared, and they happened to be, in this case, all men, whereas the first congressional hearing was all women. If you look at what newspapers have published during that time, from the first case and the second congressional hearing, the differences in the language on what happened in those rooms, and the scenarios were very similar, except maybe in the second case you had the benefit of having seen what happened in the first one, so there were certainly lessons learned. But the media, if you do actually content analysis of the representation of the testimonies, there were a lot of attributes connected to the women that were connected to their leadership or lack thereof. Whereas if you look at the publications from the most important newspapers to the tabloids, the comments on the second set of hearings were more related to systems and processes that were failing at the institutions because they were not able to deal with disruption.
Right.
And so we have a long way to go in the way we represent and talk about leadership. And when we see a failure in an institutional framework, not is that attributable to the person or is that attributable to the system? And why do we talk about it differently? Because we have a higher expectation from, one versus another. And so I hope that we can walk that journey together and identify ways of putting, pressure where it's due and rebuilding, based on facts.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we have those conversations all the time in the newsroom. That we see those analyses not just about women leaders, but about crime and race and ethnicity and economic status. All of these things, right? A lot of times, situations that shouldn't be tied to one of those things that I just listed generally are in headlines, and so we constantly have those conversations and new and better training and guidelines coming out. And so that does give hope that slowly, if we're just going to, one new training at a time, one new person gets to take that training, that next time that headline might look different. And hopefully that will continue.
And I think what we need to do is also study it, because I don't even know that it was intentional.
Totally.
When you do a content
it's decades of social learning, right?
And what we talk about implicit bias, but what I think it's interesting, and that's why I love that we are doing a lot of research on social media and how antagonizing sometimes and bipolarizing social media becomes, is because it's not necessarily that you see in the happening, it's only when you do an analysis ex post that you see those patterns of behaviors that nobody saw because let's look at journalistic headlines. Sometimes you just start copying each other, right? So it might be that there was one article that started in a certain way, and then
it took off,
and everyone was reporting then from that source. And so what I'm saying is, it's not necessarily an intentional decision. It's just a phenomenon that if we don't study it afterwards and we don't see what in retrospect it might create, we're not able to address it moving forward.
No, absolutely. It's super interesting, especially coming from a perspective of someone in academia who understands all the kind of background behind how we get to the knowledge base that we're at, right? Yeah. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you think is important or you're itching to talk about? Or
I think Women Month, and starting with the question that you raised, have we made progress? I would like to conclude to say yes, but there is so much more to do. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing this message.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.